Okay, class. Now we're going to talk about how we measure blood pressure. So first, let's define blood pressure. So let's assume that this tube here is an artery, okay? Because veins really don't have blood pressure. I'll explain that later. But this is an artery, okay? So if we look at let's start here. We're going to have blood flowing through this in this direction all the way out. And if we flip around the other side, we can see that that blood that's flowing through there is actually going to be pushing on the walls of this artery. And that is going to be blood pressure. Okay, how much pressure is exerted outward onto the walls of this artery that are going to keep it open. Okay, now the pressure that is on that blood itself, part of it is just the fact that there's blood sitting in there at all. That's going to produce a certain level of pressure. But there's also the fact that this blood is flowing through this artery, and that means that it's being pushed along by an organ, in this case the heart. So when the heart is pushing on that blood, it's exerting a force. Okay, so during systole, that's when the blood is really pushing actively in this direction. Our blood pressure is going to go up to 120. Then during diastole, when the heart is relaxing and refilling, the blood pressure is going to drop back down because it's not moving in this direction anymore. Now it's just strictly the pressure of the blood itself sitting in this enclosed chamber pushing on the walls. That's going to be about 80 millimeters of mercury. Okay, so how do we actually measure blood pressure? Well, we're going to use a blood pressure cuff and a stethoscope. So the blood pressure cuff is called a sphygmomanometer. So we're going to assume that this garden hose here is an artery. It's an artery. Okay, so we put that cuff around typically our arm so we can measure pressure in the brachial artery, but we can do it on the leg. You can actually do it around the neck. Any one of them is going to be just fine because the pressure is pretty much the same at any one of those levels. All right, so in this case, we've got that cuff that's around this artery, and we start to pump up the pressure, and it goes up really, really high. So remember, at systole, the pressure inside this artery is going to be 120. During diastole, it's going to drop down to 80. So we're going to pump that cuff up way above 120. And as soon as we get up above 120, then the pressure outside this artery is greater than the pressure inside. So we actually collapse that artery. No more blood can flow through. So if you look at your arm after you've actually got that cuff on, the lower part of your arm, if you leave it on for too long, it starts to turn kind of blue. It's getting ischemic because we're actually cut off blood flow to the arm. All right, so then we stick a stethoscope right here in our antecubital space so that we can hear when that blood vessel, in this case the brachial artery, actually opens up again. Okay, we slowly let off the pressure in that cuff and you can hear it go tss. And if you're looking at the actual meter, you can see that the pressure is starting to come down. So it's going to keep on coming down until it falls below the pressure inside the artery. Now the pressure inside the artery during systole is 120. So as soon as the pressure outside the artery falls below the pressure inside the artery opens and a little bit of blood squirts out. And then you'll hear that right here in your antecubital space with a stethoscope. It'll go boop. And then you'll see if as that pressure is coming down, it'll go tick, and then it'll keep coming down, tick. All right, so when we fall below 120, we get it to open up just during systole and squirt blood out. But then during diastole, the pressure inside the artery is now down to 80, and the pressure in the cuff is still above 80. So every time that we're in diastole, the artery will collapse again. And then during systole, it'll open again, squirt, diastole, close again. It'll keep doing that until the pressure in the cuff falls below diastolic pressure, which in this case is going to be 80. And as soon as we get below 80, now the artery is open completely and we can hear the last sound go through. So you're going to measure two pressures when you measure blood pressure: systolic pressure and diastolic pressure. Systolic pressure is when the pressure in the cuff falls below the pressure of systole. Okay, so that's the pressure inside the artery at its highest, below 120 in this case. And then once that happens, we'll get blood to squirt through the first time. And then it'll happen the second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, until we hear the last sound, and that's going to happen when the pressure outside the cuff falls below the pressure inside the artery. In this case, our diastolic pressure is 80. And then you'll hear the last sound, and then blood will flow freely after that. So that's how we measure blood pressure.